Hi, this is Terry from Tree Marie Soapworks. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this soap. The technique is called line pour, and let's get started. First I start with my lye solution. I add my cold distilled water and my sodium hydroxide, and then I always measure my sodium lactate, and that's 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And I add that later, but I just measure it now and set it by my lye solution while it's cooling. It's a natural ingredient and it just hardens the bar a little, which is really nice. It makes it last a little longer. If you don't have sodium lactate, it's totally not necessary, but if you want to harden your bar a little bit, you can use salt. You just have to dissolve it in the water before you add your lye. And I heard the ratio is 1/4 of a teaspoon per pound of hard oils. Okay, now we start measuring our hard oils. First we have our coconut oil and then our melted palm oil. And I microwave these, and then I measure my liquid oils, which is castor oil and olive oil. Okay, next we are going to prepare our colorants. And first we have ultramarine pink oxide. And all these colorants I used today are from Brambleberry. And you see the color swatches to the left there. I made those all at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oil, so I know whether I want to darken or lighten from that. But I like these colors as they are, so I'm just using 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And for today, for the amount I used 1/8 of a teaspoon plus a 1/16 of a teaspoon. So I guess I did a slight bit a little darker than the 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. And this is Tangerine Wow colorant. I'm just adding a little bit of olive oil to dilute the colorant. I don't measure this, I just add enough to get it wet, and it just adds to the superfat of the soap. And next we have our Fizzy Lemonade colorant. And again, that's 1 teaspoon per pound of oils, or 1/8 of a teaspoon plus a 1/16 of a teaspoon. Next we have hydrated chrome green pigment. All of these colorants need to have a little more attention to them, that they're a little bit harder to mix everything in. So this technique with using the palette knife is especially helpful with these. Next we have Aqua Pearl Mica. This one is a little tricky to mix, even though it says it's a mica. I found that I had specks in it if I didn't do the palette knife technique. It's just a little tricky to mix in, but it's a beautiful color. Okay, now that we have our hard oils melted, I am weighing out our cocoa butter pastilles. When I am using cocoa butter, I usually don't like to get the temperature too high, so I try to just stir them in and melt them that way from the temperature of what the hard oils melted at. Okay, next I'm going to be adding the sodium lactate to the lye solution, and then I'll strain the lye solution into a different pitcher. here I am just stirring in the cocoa butter until it's completely melted. Next I'm going to be adding champagne extract. It's from Brambleberry's Soiree collection, and it adds a little extra moisture to your bar. Now I'm adding the castor oil and olive oil to the melted hard oils and the champagne extract. Here I'm zeroing the scale and adding my liquid oils in my bowl, and then I'm adding my lye solution, and I'm going to note that weight, and then I'll subtract off the bowl and then figure out my percentages for the rest of my batch. And now that everything's together, we'll just stick blend until emulsion is reached, or light trace, whichever one. For this recipe, I wished I would have had it a little thicker, so I could have stick blended until light trace. For the 5 colors in this batch, I'm just splitting 9% of the batter, and the remaining 55% of the batter will be white. And for the white batter, I'm using titanium dioxide that's diluted, 1 part titanium dioxide to 3 parts olive oil, and then I use 2 tablespoons. And now we're just adding all the colorants that are already diluted into the 9% batter in each cup. This fragrance is from Brambleberry's Soiree collection. It's called Peach Prosecco, and it's a kind of a fruity, I would say floral. It sort of reminds me of Energy. I just figured out ahead of time how much 9% of the total is, and then I added that to my colors and just added the rest to the white batter. Next, you'll need to get your squeeze bottles ready, and you'll need one for each color, including the white. And then you fill them with each of the colors. Next, it's time to prepare the mold. This is a tall, skinny mold. See these blocks? I would say they're about 3/8 thick, or 1/4 of an inch thick or so. So I used 3 of them, and then I ended up adding another one. It would be propped up 1 to 1.5 inches on the left side. And then as you keep adding more batter, you just will need to take one of the blocks out as you go. And you can see that my batter was a little thin when I started pouring, and as I go it thickens up and it's a little better lines. The ones at first kind of created a wavy line, which I kind of liked how it turned out, but it wasn't what I was going for in this batch. And I just did random amounts in random color order, and I just kept going until the batter ran out. This technique is really good for a landscape look. You could do an ocean on the bottom and like a sunset on the top, or a cloudy sky on the top. And really the sky's the limit to what you could do with this design. When I got to the top, I just added the colors to the top that I had left and tried to make a design, and then I did a little swirl. But since this batter was a little thin, I ended up having to cut it off later because the top was kind of a funny texture. Once I was finished with this, I put it through gel using a heating pad, and I left it for 2 days. And you can see the top came out kind of weird, so I planed it off, and I'm just going to use those extra things that I plane off to make soap balls with. So here I was beveling the 4 sides that were the long sides, and I'm taking a little off of each end so you can see the design a little better. And then I'll divide this whole thing by 4. I want to turn the bar and cut it in the 90 degrees so that we'll get a straight line instead of that curved line that kind of looks like a tiger swirl. So here I cut this first one, and I'm just going to check and see if I like it cut that different way. And my bars I cut to 1 inch deep so that I can fit them in my boxes. And I decided that I liked it cut that way, so it's more of a straight line than that curved line. And so I'm finishing cutting each of these. And then I'll turn them 90 degrees and cut the other way. And as I finish up, I want to tell you some of the things that I learned from making this soap. First, the fragrance I use, the new Peach Prosecco, it actually slows down acceleration, so that would be a good one to use in a batch that I need it to stay fluid for a long time, like Dancing Funnel or this technique. But second thing I learned is you have to get it to proper trace. I hadn't used this before, so I was worried about it speeding up, and so I started pouring a little too early, and you can see on the bottom I got that weird texture, but it actually really turned out really cool. It looks kind of like waves, and I like how it came out. But if I'm trying to just do a straight line, I need to wait till proper trace. The next thing I learned is that this technique takes a long time when you use squeeze bottles. And I've seen another way to do it where you use a in the pot swirl and you put all the colors in the pot with the white batter, and you just pour back and forth like that, and it comes out really neat. So when I'm doing another in the pot swirl, I might try that technique instead of this one with the squeeze bottles. Another thing I learned from this is I really love this color combination, and I want to use it in bigger stripes because it's just such a pretty combination. And I'm also hoping that you learned something from this video, so if you did, feel free to comment below. And if you have any questions, also please comment below. Also, if anybody knows the ratio of salt to water when you're not using sodium lactate and replacing it with salt, that would be great if you could comment below too. If you liked this video and would like to see more like this, please like and subscribe, and if you would like to get notifications when I post the next video, just hit the bell. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.